New details on the drone registry, what happens when Slack goes down, and how the Amazon Echo can improve your relationship with your wife. Tech News Tonight is next.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Tonight, episode 473 for Monday, November 23rd, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Epson's new EcoTank printers. With Epson's line of SuperTank all-in-one printers, you can print thousands of documents without running out of ink. EcoTank is loaded and ready to print when you are. Visit epson.com/ecotank to find out more. Welcome, I am Megan Maroney. Let's get to the tech news. The Federal Aviation Administration presented proposed drone regulations today that would require every new drone owner to register with the federal government. The recommendations focus on registering drone owners, not each individual drone. These are still simply recommendations, not laws or even set rules yet. The proposal was drafted by the FAA's task force, which includes the FAA's drone chief, the head of Google's drone project, and 24 other drone aeronautics and aviation experts. The guidelines would apply to drones weighing up to 55 pounds, and registration would be easy and free. Amazon's personal living room assistant, the Echo, just got smarter. Kevin Toffel over at ZDNet reports that the Echo now has advanced trigger commands with if this, then that, otherwise known as IFTTT, otherwise known as controlling all the things. You can now use IFTTT to create recipes to connect to apps, data, or actions. So you can do things like use your voice to trigger Echo to find your phone, unsilence your phone, lock your front door, text your wife to tell her you love her. I highly recommend that one, and much more. In other voice-controlled devices news, Google created a prototype of a product that would work like the famous communicator badge on Star Trek. In an interview with Time, Google's senior vice president of search, Amit Singhal, says Google tested a lapel pin designed to use a microphone to listen to your voice and send commands to other devices via Bluetooth. Sadly, the prototype never became a real product. Or did it? Communications tool Slack went down for several hours today, and if you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, then you clearly do not know how to communicate solely using kitten GIFs. Slack is an instant messaging program favored by startups and millennials with a plan for world domination and no patience for email. The service disruption cleared up a little after 2 p.m. Pacific time, but not before literally hundreds of people went bonkers on Twitter at the idea of having to talk with their coworkers using words. Now, full disclosure, Slack is a sponsor of the Twit Network, not on this show, but on other shows. Coming up, fantasy sports. Is it a game of skill or not? And how to send Star Wars spoilers to the dark side. But first, this episode is brought to you by Epson. Epson's revolutionary EcoTank line of printers for home and office introduce a new age in printing. The new EcoTank ET4550 wireless all-in-one printer doesn't use ink cartridges. Instead, it features an innovative refillable ink tank. It comes with enough ink to print up to 8,500 pages. That's equivalent to about 50 ink cartridge sets. You're loaded and ready to print for up to 2 years. Powered by Epson's leading-edge precision core technology, it delivers high-speed, vivid colors and laser-quality black text, plus auto two-sided printing, a 30-page auto document feeder, and easy wireless printing from tablets and smartphones. All EcoTank printers deliver an unbeatable combination of convenience and value with ultra-low-cost replacement ink bottles. Now you have the freedom to print without running out of ink. Visit epson.com/ecotank today to transform the way your home, office, or work group prints. For the best combination of ease and value, turn to the new Epson EcoTank printers. That's epson.com/ecotank, and we thank Epson for their support. Pay-to-play fantasy sports sites like DraftKings and FanDuel are headed to the New York Supreme Court this week to plead their case. Here to explain what's at stake in this case is Kurt Wagner, reporter at Recode. Welcome, Kurt.
Hi, Megan. How you doing?
I am doing well. So for those of us who are not sports fans, fantasy or otherwise, can you give a quick description of how DraftKings and FanDuel work?
I can. So for a really long time, fantasy sports was a season-long experience. And so what that means is at the beginning of the season, you would typically get together with some friends, and we'll use the NFL, for example. You would draft a team of players. These are real-life players. And as they perform each Sunday in real-life games, you get points depending on how well they do. And so throughout the season, you would play against all your friends, and by the end of the season, someone's team would have performed the best and you win. Well, DraftKings and FanDuel, what they did was they sped everything up and they said, instead of playing a whole season and waiting 3 or 4 months until there's a winner, why don't you draft a new team every day? And depending on who's playing that day, those are the players that you have to choose from. And oh, by the way, we'll also let you put a few dollars in the pot, and the winners will get real money. So it's not just necessarily for pride with your friends over 4 months. It's for cash prizes against strangers today and tomorrow and the next day. And so what they've been doing is they've been operating like this now for a number of years. But just in the last couple months, they have come under a lot of scrutiny that basically they're operating gambling sites. And so now regulators are trying to come in and regulate like they are gambling sites. And so that's what's creating a lot of the issue.
So it looks like gambling to me. How are they making the case that it's not gambling?
So for the years that they have been operating, they have essentially said that it's not gambling because it's a game of skill. So when I sit down on Sunday morning and I draft my team of real-life players, I'm doing so because I am, in theory, a football fan, and I've been, I know which matchups are good for that day. I know which players have been playing well and which ones haven't. There's a skill involved in me picking my team, and therefore there's the more skillful players are more likely to win. So that's the argument from DraftKings and FanDuel, is that it's not gambling because people can be good at this. And then on the other side, the Attorney General in this case in the state of New York is saying, well, you're putting money down on a future outcome that you as a player have no control over. For example, I can't, in my living room, I can't determine how well a quarterback is going to do, how many yards he's going to have or touchdowns. I'm just sitting there watching the game. And so that is an outcome that's outside of my control, which is the argument from the Attorney General. So those are the two sides that are going to be displayed on Wednesday in court.
Well, what about poker? I mean, poker is a game of skill. Some people are better at it than others. It's still gambling.
That would be the DraftKings FanDuel argument. You would have just probably made their day by saying that. The Attorney General pointed out, he wrote an op-ed last week. I think it was for the Daily News in New York, and Eric Schneiderman, who's the Attorney General in New York, he wrote an op-ed, and he basically said as much. He said, listen, it's not necessarily that skill is involved in his eyes. There is skill in poker, as you pointed out, and as he pointed out, what he is simply saying is that the definition of gambling in the state of New York is that you're putting money down on a future outcome that you cannot control. So regardless of whether or not there's skill involved, the fact that you can't control what's happening is what, in his eyes, constitutes as gambling.
What do you think? Do you think it's gambling?
Man, I've kind of gone back and forth on this a little bit. So I've been a fantasy sports player for a number of years. I don't really do daily fantasy, which is what this is, but I'm certainly familiar with it. I have done it before, but I don't do it regularly. I think the best analogy I've seen so far is that someone compared daily fantasy to playing the stock market. So they said, you're risking your money on, in this case, players, but when you do stocks, you're risking your money on companies that they're going to do well on a certain day or maybe over a certain period of time. And you have some kind of reason, research that you've done or whatever it may be to lead you to believe that that player or that company is going to do well. The major difference is with DraftKings and FanDuel, there are literally no regulations. So I'm throwing my money out there and there's no one to really regulate what's happening. Whereas, as you know, the stock market is highly regulated. And so I think that is really what's going to happen here, is that there needs to be regulations around this in order for people to feel comfortable with it. I guess if you are forcing me to pick, I would lean on the side of gambling. It does feel like gambling, but I am also sympathetic to the skill argument as someone who has played fantasy for a long time and knows what that can be like.
And in many ways, this is what happens in so many different industries right now with technology. You're talking about people just playing. It's small. It's like, oh, I'm just going to make a mixtape for someone. It's small. But then when you add technology and you think, oh, I'm going to, I'm going to download a bunch of music. And when it scales is when there's trouble. So is this kind of what's happening because it's so big and there's technology involved? That's where they're getting into trouble.
I think that could be part of it. I mean, what's somewhat ironic is that they've been able to operate for, I think DraftKings been around for maybe 4 years and FanDuel for even longer than that. They've been able to operate essentially without anyone paying much attention to them And then this fall, they both raised hundreds of millions of dollars in funding over the summer, and they have been spending hundreds of millions of dollars on TV commercials since the football season started. So if you turn on ESPN or Fox Sports or any of these sites, or excuse me, these programs, you're going to see DraftKings and FanDuel advertising, television advertising. So they've drawn a ton of attention to themselves over the last 2 or 3 months. And the other thing that happened was that an employee at DraftKings got in trouble because he started sharing some information about how people were picking their teams with the public. And what raised a red flag was that that information, when you're betting real money, can make an impact on whether or not you win, but that employees of these companies, a lot of people were afraid, had access to that information and were playing the games. So all of a sudden you have employees of the company have access to information that might help them win money, and they're also participating. So that raised a bunch of red flags. I want to say that was early September. And of course, from there, things really snowballed and people started saying, well, let's take a closer look at what they're actually doing. And voila, now we have a court date on Wednesday to actually determine if they can continue to operate. So it has been a mighty fall in the last 3 months.
So is this for them to continue to operate at all, or in New York?
This is for them to continue to operate in New York until a more formal, more advanced trial takes place at some later date. So the Attorney General issued cease and desist letters saying, we think, or I think, that you're considered gambling. Y'all need to stop what you're doing until we can review this with a jury trial. And DraftKings and FanDuel said, well, that could take months. This is, we shouldn't have to halt our operations for the next potentially 6 months or whatever it may be. Let's rush this expedited hearing and have a judge determine whether or not we can continue to operate until then. I do think it's an important decision, though, not just because it'll determine whether they can operate until a more formal trial takes place, but I think there's a precedent issue here. So if a judge comes out and says, hey, I think this is gambling, or hey, I don't think this is gambling, I think that that's going to weigh heavily on whether or not other judges in other states want to say the same thing. Because right now it's very much a state-by-state basis. That's what, that's one of the issues with gambling, and what Uber and Lyft experienced a lot with their ride-sharing stuff is a lot of this stuff is regulated at the state level. And so you kind of got to do it 50 times.
So it's interesting you bring up Uber. I understand the regulators, the Attorney General is upset about this. Are casinos, traditional casinos, also upset about this? Is this kind of like casinos versus online fantasy, like it's cab drivers versus Uber?
So it's a little funny. The I think it's the American Gambling Association, which represents the interests of a lot of these casinos, has said, no, we love daily fantasy. It's good for us. The more people who are, essentially playing fantasy sports around the games are therefore tuning into the games and perhaps more likely to gamble on the games. At the same time, the state of Nevada has banned DraftKings and FanDuel and says that they're gambling and won't let them operate. And the reason is because, in my mind, the state and the regulators of the state are not getting the fees that normal casinos have to pay in order to operate in Nevada. So I think what you're seeing is casinos say, hey, listen, this can be good for business, but it's gambling, and in order to operate, you need to pay the same fees that all of us pay. Otherwise, we're not going to let you here in the state. And the funny thing is that DraftKings and FanDuel can't pay those fees without essentially admitting that they are gambling, right? If they're willing to pay the gambling fees in Nevada, then they're saying, you're right, we're gambling, here's our fee to operate. So they really can't, I can't really envision a scenario where they become legal in that state. We'll have to see what plays out, but right now they're in a bit of a tricky situation there.
So in a lot of ways, it is similar to what's going on with Uber. I mean, the regulators want to get money, the money they get from cab drivers. They want to get that same kind of money from Uber, and that's really why they're doing that. So it really comes down to money. They're not really necessarily concerned with what gambling is doing to people.
In my opinion, yes. I mean, you look at the fact that it's been able to go on this long and no one really raised a red flag about it. The fact that gambling and sports gambling is allowed in some states, clearly they're not concerned about the impact of gambling in Nevada. They have it there. They just want money. I mean, New York would argue otherwise. They would say, well, this is we're trying to protect consumers. And I think to some extent that's going to be their argument. I don't know how legitimate that is. If they were able to also tax this business and make some money from it, I would imagine that they'd let it operate. So we'll see. But yes, in Nevada for sure, this is a money issue as far as I can tell.
Well, you have a great piece up on Recode about this topic. What else do you have that you've written in the past week?
Well, a few things. I've written a few things on Snapchat. The most recent was today. They made a small change to their live stories feature. Essentially, they want to try and get more people contributing snaps, photos, videos, things like that to the app so that, you know, they can have better look-ins on live events and things. I also think that, you know, the more content you have, the more real estate you have to show ads alongside that content. And you know, it's no secret that Snapchat is a young, growing business, and they're looking for ways to make money. So I think that's interesting. And you and I were talking right before we went on here that I got to test out the Samsung Gear VR headset last week before it launched on Friday. It was started to ship on Friday. It's kind of the first mainstream virtual reality headset for the general public. And you know, I'm not a product reviewer. I am not a VR enthusiast by any stretch, but I will say that I was pretty impressed with everything that I got to experience on the headset. It was pretty cool stuff. I don't think that I would wear one around even in my own house just yet. I maybe if I was totally by myself, but they do look a little funky. But that was kind of fun. That was a new experience for me. Again, I don't do a lot of product reviews, so that was cool. Oh, God. Yeah, there you go. Thanks for that. The beauty of wearing the headset in the office, and I will say this is a testament to how, you know, quote unquote immersed I was. I had the noise canceling headphones. I obviously couldn't see anything. I was truly in another world, probably watching Netflix or something, and there's my dear colleague Peter Kafka sneaking up behind me for a selfie. So that was really kind of him to share to everybody on the internet.
Well, and plus you're not shaving. Yeah, well, you're welcome. You're not shaving for November, right? So then later you're kind of in disguise. We can't see your eyes. You normally don't have a beard, and
this is new. This, you know, I haven't done the No Shave November before, but I was like, you know what? It sounds kind of fun, and so I'm actually doing it. I'll plug my own campaign while I have you. I'm doing a campaign. You can read it on it's at the top of my Twitter page. But it's a really great way to raise money for cancer research organizations. And I made like $600 because of putting down the razor this month, which I will say much more than I thought. Therefore, it makes me think that this is a pretty cool idea. I may become a regular. And there's where, that was me just 3 short weeks ago with the baby face, and come back in a week and I'll probably look like
Brad Pitt.
Brad and I have a lot in common. I'm sure you already know that. So, yeah, if any of you out there want to go chip in $5 to the beard and to the campaign, it'd be great.
Excellent. Well, we will put that up in the show notes. And right now, if you're listening, at Kurt Wagner 8 is your Twitter. So go donate for cancer. Thank you so much for doing that. And thanks for coming on, Kurt.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Bye.
And finally tonight, those of you who require total information blackout for the new Star Wars movie might be pleased to know that Product Hunt just posted a Chrome extension that you can install that will block all Star Wars spoilers before it's too late. The Star Wars Spoilers Blocker was created by Max Al-Farrak. He's the co-founder of JitBit. If you're about to encounter a website with a possible Star Wars spoiler, the extension will automatically show you the warning, potential spoilers ahead. So if you're concerned, go get that Chrome extension. And that is it for this edition of Tech News Tonight. Thank you for sticking around. I know your time is valuable. I thank each and every one of you for spending that time with me. And I love your feedback. Email me at megan@twit.tv. We are on TuneIn, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, Roku, and the Apple TV. You can also subscribe to the show at twit.tv/TN2. Write to us at tn2@twit.tv and watch live every weekday at 4 p.m. Pacific. And don't miss our morning news program, Tech News Today, every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm Megan Maroney. Thanks for watching.
Bandwidth for Tech News Tonight is brought to you by CashFly.com.